Now to today's topic, the revolution in artificial intelligence, or AI. When many of us think of AI, we think of ChatGPT, the large language model released a couple of years ago by the California-based startup OpenAI, an organization which seems to be undergoing its own convulsions at present. And AI is certainly having a moment. This month, the New Yorker features a profile of the computer scientist Geoffrey Hinton. Yet, to study the arc of his career is to realize that whatever AI is, it has been gathering momentum for at least half a century. It didn't arrive fully formed a few years ago. So, for example, Hinton was able to study for a doctorate in AI at the University of Edinburgh, interestingly enough, in the mid-1970s. Artificial intelligence seems to have progressed in fits and starts to a point where the more sophisticated versions would probably meet what is known as the Turing test. Alan Turing, computing pioneer, devised a test which held that any computer that could persuasively imitate a human in conversation could be said reasonably to think. Hinton, who did more than most to nurture generative AI to its current pitch, has emerged as a skeptic of the unregulated use of AI. He posits that there are two approaches to AI. There's denial and there's stoicism. Everybody's first reaction to AI is, we've got to stop this. He continues, we can't be in denial, we need to think, how do we make it not as awful for humanity as it might be? However, as some have argued, humanity is facing three great transformational crises all at once: geopolitical, climatic, and digital. It's also difficult for many of us to understand the magnitude of change the new digital capabilities involve. Essentially, to quote a recent article, they will fundamentally change our whole way of life, from how we produce and consume to how we learn and interact with each other. So, whatever the revolution that is unfurling, it will be contested. All the more reason, then, to try to understand a little of what is possible and a little of what is at stake. 4 months ago, we looked at some of the challenges that AI might pose. This session will focus more on its possibilities. Saskia Oditt is a strategy consultant at the intersection of technology, finance, retail, and startups. Leveraging her prior consulting experience, Saskia leads Yes Brand Me, assisting small businesses through brand building strategies. As the publisher of AI Amplify, a digital newsletter, Saskia helps entrepreneurs to harness AI's potential. And I'm going to hand over to Saskia now with some relief so that she can talk us through what AI is about and the revolution.
I'm excited to speak to you all about AI and about generative AI. It's been hitting all of our news feeds, I'm sure, and everyone's very curious about, what it is, how we can leverage it, and what are the benefits. So, welcome to the AI revolution. As it says here, generative AI is a cutting-edge technology that enables machines to produce new and original content. So we're talking images, music, and text in a way that we haven't really seen before the last year or so. So I'd like you to think back about the first time you've ever played with anything generative AI. So for example, ChatGPT. If you're anything like me, it invoked a real sense of magic. How is this program doing this? How is it interpreting the language that I'm telling it as I speak to you? It can write poetry, it told me a joke, it wrote me a story. And this act of creation that was so fundamentally human was now coming through our computer screens and interacting with all of us like another person. But it's not another person, and it's not magic. It is math and science. And as Isabel touched on, it is not a new phenomenon. So let's just go into briefly what is AI, so everyone's up to speed. AI essentially is trying to give computers the ability to think like humans do and capture human intelligence. So there are a bunch of buzzwords that you may hear when people speak about AI. So for example, machine learning, right? So I wanted to go through some of these and tell you at a high level what they are and how we got to the place that we are today. So machine learning is essentially when we feed the computer a bunch of data, and in order to teach it how to pick out various patterns and relationships. And essentially, it makes predictions, clusters, or classifications with this data. That is the first point that AI started at. Then we went to deep learning after a few decades. And this is a subset of machine learning, and essentially it's even more data, more complex data for a specific purpose. And again, we're doing predictions, clusters, classifications. So we're grouping data, doing basic analysis on it. Generative AI, however, what's different about it is that now we're creating novel data, novel output. So an image that has literally never been seen before, a computer can generate that and show it to us. So generative AI, a subset, is GPT. So we all know ChatGPT. And this is essentially when a certain subset of generative AI can speak to you and understand and generate human knowledge, like a chatbot, ChatGPT, Bard, etc. So hopefully that gives you an understanding of what exactly ChatGPT is in the landscape of AI on the whole. So as Isabel touched on, AI has been around for quite a while, actually. So a lot of people have just started paying attention now, but it's actually been around since the early 1950s. And the term artificial intelligence was termed in 1956. So as I said before, the progression of AI over time went from machine learning, so symbolic AI, where they were essentially using computers to mimic how humans use logic. So if not this, then this, how we basically pick between choices, right? So that's how it all started. Gradually, over the last couple of decades, AI has become more and more popular as it started to increase its computational power. So as we increase in hardware, our capabilities increase in hardware, we were able to increase our ability to process large amounts of data. And then AIs became more and more robust over time. Until we got to deep learning in the early 2000s. What essentially this was that instead of basic, say like a decision tree, logic-based symbolic type AI started to be programmed leveraging neural networks. So think about how your brain works and how you're able to absorb so many pieces of information and start making connections. And these patterns will be, they're really robust, right? You're taking information from your past, from your present, you're making predictions about the future, and it incorporates a lot of different sections of your brain. That's how deep learning was, that's what it was trying to mimic. And essentially, it got more and more robust over time until we got to generative AI. So this is an illustration of where we started and where we are now. For example, tables, right? We all know this basic Excel database, right? Columns and rows, inputting data and then analyzing it in a simple way. Then we progress to graphs. So we're looking at trends in the data and relationships between like different data points. And then this is what large language models look like. So as you can see, inputs and then a lot of different connections to a lot of different things. What this enables a program to do is that, for example, it will look at a word and it will say, okay, well, based on all of this information that I've been fed, this is what I predict the next word to be. So if you've ever used predictive text on your phone, this is very similar. So, as we know, AI is quite controversial, right? It's been characterized by cycles of optimism followed by periods of skepticism. But it's undeniable that in the last recent years, there's been just unprecedented progress and innovation in terms of AI and how it can impact our lives, especially in the last year. Day-to-day uses of generative AI. In this slide, I wanted to capture not only what it can do in terms of a business sense and general sense, but also how you and I can possibly use it in day-to-day life, right? So there are limitless ways to use generative AI, but here are a few that I thought would be really relevant to everyone. Creative content generation. Using things like DALL-E or ChatGPT to generate images, music, artwork, text, and art design, different types of content that perhaps I would not be able to pick up a tablet and draw in, say, like Monet style, right? But I can generate content using AI in the style of Monet and get a completely different art piece or inspiration for an art piece I wanted to create on my own. Secondly, education and skill development. So AI, generative AI is very, very useful in adapting lessons and exercises based on your individual needs. So because you can prompt it and speak to it naturally, you can actually get, say, like custom lessons plans, recipes. You know, I can ask my ChatGPT, hey, I have milk, pasta, and eggs in my fridge. What can I make with those? And it will develop a recipe for me, probably Alfredo, if I had to guess. It can also serve as your editor, your coding assistant. It can generate step-by-step guides for you. And it can also help with content creation in terms of written content creation. So if you're a blogger and a writer, if you've ever done like a press release and you wanted to generate text, either inspirational or edit your draft, you can definitely do that with ChatGPT because of the prompting feature. You can use it to translate languages. And this is actually really cool because they're using ChatGPT and other programs like it to actually translate ancient languages. So that's how powerful it can be. It can see patterns that are far beyond what our brains can see, even now, even after just, you know, a few years, and translate vast amounts of data needed to interpret ancient languages. So it's quite interesting. Virtual assistants and chatbots. So you'll see this all over the internet now, how you can speak to a chatbot in a natural language and you can get assistance back from it in the form of customer service as if you were speaking to a real representative. But at the back of that, there's like a massive amount of data that is far beyond a chatbot that you would have spoken to, say, 5 years ago. And you can also use it as your personal assistant, you know, sending reminders, sending messages, calendar management, that kind of thing. In a business setting, there have been a lot of advancements within medicine and healthcare. So they're actually using ChatGPT to test different types of proteins, drug strategies in a much faster way than, say, any human can do it. So that's very, very interesting and could potentially make massive medical breakthroughs in the next 5 to 10 years. And but for you and I, we can use it in ways that are like creating tailored workout plans that take into account, say, our individual needs. You know, I have a bad knee, so can you create a tailored workout plan for me that keeps that in mind? And it will. So that's really interesting. It can also give you mindfulness exercises if you've ever had a hard time. You'll see a lot of advancements in entertainment from generative AI. So it's impacting the gaming industry in a huge way right now by enabling us to create some hyper realistic gaming environments and characters and narratives, and basically advancing what we could have ever done before in a very rapid way. For our uses day to day, we can use it to do things like personalized book recommendations. You know, I like Harry Potter. Can you suggest other books that I would like? Or I love, you know, Shawshank Redemption, right? Like, can you suggest like a movie? One of the best things about generative AI, though, is how it has improved accessibility for people. So it can actually give a lot of people capabilities that would have been difficult to access before or were not as developed before. Things like text to speech, image description, subtitling, transcribing, but in a much, much easier, natural to use way. Because that's one of the biggest advantages of having chat-based generative AIs. The fact that it's so easy for you and I to just use it without, say, being a software developer. We can talk to it like if it's a person, which we're used to doing. Our research and simulation. We can run those massive simulations that would have taken forever to run and would have been very difficult to predict scenarios and write a custom program to do that. We can use generative AI to start getting through those difficult, complex phenomena and analyze that in a much faster way. So you could test scenarios. You can actually use generative AI to brainstorm, which is very, very useful if you know you're stuck at work and you don't really have anyone whose brain you particularly can pick on the issue that you're having. You can definitely query generative AI and talk back and forth with it as if you're in a brainstorming session to generate different ideas and so on. And many, many more. This is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what you could do with generative AI. If you haven't tried it already, I would highly suggest going to OpenAI and using ChatGPT and seeing just what you can do, because chances are you can customize it to exactly your needs. So with all of the awesome accessibility and capabilities that AI has given us, there are some limitations and challenges that I would like to briefly warn you about before you start playing around with AI. Firstly, they can be very biased. So you're not talking to a completely neutral program, right? They are impacted by the data that goes into them. So it's good to remember that and look at your result and analyze that accordingly. Secondly, if you're a business, you should know that there's some ethical and legal considerations when thinking about implementing AI into your business. Generative AI decisions are often very opaque. we say it's like a black box because you can't really track exactly what it did to get to the conclusion that it did. Because it's like asking someone exactly how they thought out a solution. You're never going to get it completely comprehensively, right? It's very expensive. So this is more in terms of if you were trying to do your own GPT. Every time you query ChatGPT, it costs OpenAI, I think it was like 30 cents, which, considering how much we all play around with it, racks up a huge bill. And then, yeah, so mindless parroting, it will just repeat exactly input in, input out. Same thing with bias, right? And the fifth, which I think is very interesting and will become more and more of a talking point as time goes on, is that AI lacks human values, right? So it lacks the capacity to model essentially the ethical implications of what it's suggesting. So it's always good to have a human eye on the output and not just take it at face value, like really think through, because it will suggest what it thinks is most, say, efficient, but not necessarily what aligns with you. And also sustainability. So this is a huge thing to keep in mind when implementing AI and supporting AI going forward. It's extremely power hungry. So it will rack up massive bills, not for you and I, but any business that decides to get into this field. And so sustainable AI will actually become a huge talking point in the future. And hallucinations. So your AI, like a person, will make up information if it does not know it. And they call this a hallucination. So it will present you with inaccurate information or simply just make up the information that it didn't know. So it's always good to proofread and double check everything. That being said, it still saves a lot of time, and you can ask it to quote its sources. Copyright and IP infringement. So a lot of people are being very protective over their intellectual property. Right now, there aren't a lot of the laws in place needed to protect against, say, something like copyright infringement. Even Disney is a victim of this, and they're extremely litigious. And so that might be one thing to keep in mind and watch as, like, say you're playing around, especially with imaging, but also with someone's way of speaking, right? Because I can go and I can write a speech and I could put it into ChatGPT and I could be like, can you rephrase this? Like if Obama was saying it, right? And it will give me in Obama's voice, which brings up a lot of ethical considerations. Is Obama's way of speaking his way of speaking? And should I be able to emulate that? So that's something to keep in mind going forward. And static. Most generative AI models cannot update their knowledge in real time. So keep that in mind. If you're asking it something really recent, it may or may not feed you misinformation. For example, ChatGPT up until version 3.5 only had a knowledge base of September 2021 and back. So keep that in mind. And ethical considerations of generative AI. So data privacy, these are things to keep in mind as time goes on. So data privacy, your data, other people's data, definitely keep an eye on the news in terms of how this will affect you. Integrity and authenticity. Again, bias in, bias out, and AI is a tool, right? So essentially, it's only as good morally as the people who use it and build it. And job displacement. So there's been a lot of talk on how AI can automate certain tasks that would have been people's entire jobs before. And we've seen this several times over humanity, right? Like the Industrial Revolution, the internet, those are examples of when technology came in and massively disrupted the job landscape. AI will do something very similar. Future advancements and potential impact to keep in mind: innovation. So you'll see a lot of new programs, a lot of new ways of doing things that you used to do before, new programs, new capabilities. Medicine, as I said, this is very relevant going forward. Keeping an eye on healthcare and how AI will transform that, particularly in terms of, say, prediction, disease prediction, drug discovery, etc., and robotics, right? So we've all seen Boston Dynamics and their advancements in robotics, and there will be a lot of advancements in terms of making robots more intelligent and increasing the ways that they can interact with us. So that's something to definitely keep in mind, particularly around security and times of conflict and so on. Yep. So key takeaways are: AI definitely transcends the digital realm, right? Please don't make the mistake of thinking that it is just something on your computer that you can ignore as like, because it wouldn't be relevant to you. In fact, it will mean a lot to all of us, right? In terms of the physical world and how it will affect our energy, our climate, medicine, discovery of new materials, addressing pressing challenges we have as a species. And ultimately, our success hinders a lot on, or depends a lot on how we approach AI. So like I said, there are a lot of ethical concerns, and we see new models, and it is changing so rapidly that I could not sit here and accurately predict to you how AI will look in 10 months, because 10 months ago, no one anticipated that we would be here today. Not even people who launched ChatGPT a year ago. So yeah, in the last year, it's gone from being, oh, look at this fascinating novelty, to being on almost 70% of all Fortune 500 companies, their digital transformation agendas, and getting massive amounts of funding. And so it will definitely change the landscape of how we interact with things, the businesses we see, how businesses interact with us. And because of all of this, it is worth being an independent decision maker and being empowered in that by advancing your knowledge surrounding AI. So definitely take an interest, and be proactive, and speak to your leaders, look at what they're doing in terms of how they're handling AI, because it will make a difference in terms of your privacy and your future and the landscape that you interact in. And if you're a business, I would say now is a great time to start making plans for evaluating your strategy and seeing different ways that you could leverage AI to automate processes, speed up your workflows, and so on going forward. So what do you think about generative AI? I would love to hear people's opinions, hear questions, any concerns that you personally have.